speak to them. And when they are being softened by the Spirit of God, be ready to speak to them. I just think that is what God calls us all to do. And when we have those people in our life that He's led us into, and we continue to reach out to them that way, you will begin to see God moving in their life through you. That's when the Christian faith comes alive, friends. And that's what I challenge you guys to understand and to experience. I just think the only place we can truly find peace in our life is by walking in the will of God. When we walk in the will of God, as Paul did, and he stayed in Corinth for another year and a half, he continued to hear God's voice. He continued to see God lead him. He continued to see God have impact in the lives of those in Corinth. So how do we do that? We do that by knowing that God is with us. We need to continually be reminded that God is with us. And if you feel like God has left you, if you feel like you're abandoned, find your prayer tent. Go to that place and say, God, if you're there, speak to me. And I know God will. He'll begin to speak to you as you go to Him in His Word. And for Him to say, you're not alone. Now, there was actually a couple of weeks ago, I was at that point, like Paul, of feeling discouraged and feeling alone and just going, God, am I supposed to continue to be doing what I'm doing here? And so I dropped Gertie off at the bus to go to summer school. And it's early in the morning, and I drove down, and there's a parking lot next to the river off of Redlands Parkway, and I drove in there, and I was parked by the river, and I got out my Bible on my computer, and I just said, Lord, I need a word from you. That was my prayer tent. My car was my prayer tent that morning, okay? So you can be very creative of what your prayer tent is for you. And as I went to the Lord, I said, Lord, I just need you to speak to me. And I just out of instinct went to Acts 18 because I was kind of working on the sermon of what I felt God wanted us to talk about. And this verse just jumped off the page at me. It was like through the Spirit of God, God was speaking to me directly. It was like God said, Kirk, don't be afraid. Kirk, keep on speaking. Don't be silent, for I am with you. And no one is going to attack and harm you because I have many people in this city. And so as God spoke to me, then what I did was I began to journal on my little laptop computer. And I would encourage you guys to get in the practice of journaling. Because through journaling, I believe it's a great spiritual discipline. As you journal, you can either write or type like I do. That as I'm doing that, I'm praying. And God is just, as He does that, He continues to speak to me. And as I'm listening, I journal what I sense God saying and what He's doing. And I was very encouraged by the Lord. It was God's reminder, hey, Kirk, I'm still with you. And I still have many people in Canyon View that are with you. And there are many people in the Grand Valley that need to hear about me. It was incredibly encouraging to me, and it gave me what I needed at that time to keep going. But I had to go to my prayer tent. I had to go to the place to allow God to speak to me. So the question, are you with us? Are you with Canyon View and what God is doing here? Do you want to be a part of what God's doing for the great kingdom? Are you excited to hear what we bring back after the retreat, to hear God speaking to us and where He's directing us? If you are, can I hear a hoo-yah? All right. Because it really is, in my mind, there's nothing more exciting to be together, knowing that God is with us, and knowing that we're not alone. We're in this together. God has called us to impact the kingdom together. And I can't think of a greater group of people to do that with than you lovely people. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are awesome. Because Kirk says so. Now, a word of warning. If you choose to join us, here's what you're getting into. Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Oh, I need to go back. While Gallio in verse 12 was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul. Great. And brought him into the court. This man, they charge, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the Jew. Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallio, who was the Roman proconsul, and many theologians believe that, the Roman officials were tired of the Jews. It seems like the Jews were always fighting each other. The Jews were always raising a ruckus. This is exactly what was going on here. And Gallio said to the Jews, if you Jews are making a complaint about some misdemeanor or serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names in your own law, settle the matter yourselves, you bunch of whiny frizzers. I will not be a judge of such things. So he had them ejected from the court. Then they all turned on Sosthenes, the synagogue ruler, and beat him in front of the court. But Gallio showed no concern whatever. Just a quick note, if you want to be critical, if you want to have a religious spirit and you want to lead a conspiracy against the leaders of the church, be ready because it's coming back on you. This is a guarantee. I just see that happen over and over again. But, it's interesting that Sosthenes, the synagogue ruler, I thought Crispus was the synagogue ruler. What I think happened, Crispus left the synagogue because he was following Jesus now. And so Sosthenes was put in his place. He's probably the second guy in charge. He's probably really thinking, all right, we got Crispus out of here. I'm in charge now. I'm going to lead this group against Paul. He takes them there, and all of a sudden, he's the one that gets beaten. Like I said, sheep have sharp teeth. But Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Then he left the brothers and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. So now he's continued his course of following God's leading and being an apostle. What an apostle goes and plants churches. And then he kind of oversees the churches he plants. He raises up leaders, he puts them in place, and then he goes to the next place. This is who Paul is, and there are many people. I don't see myself as being like an apostle like Paul, but this is the way he was. But before he sailed, he had his hair cut off at Cenchrea because of a vow he had taken. And they arrived at Ephesus, where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila. He himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. There he goes again, right to the synagogue first. When they asked him to spend more time with them, he declined. But as he left, he promised. Now here again is a different spiritual climate in Ephesus than there was in Corinth, isn't there? That in Ephesus they seem to, hey, Paul, please stay. We love hearing about the Messiah. Teach us more. And he says, I will come back if it is God's will. Then he set sail from Ephesus. I will come back if it is God's will. As we follow the Lord, knowing he is with us, knowing that we are never alone, we have to understand that God has his will. And we choose to follow according to his directives. The question is, what is his will, right? We don't always know. The main thing is, oftentimes, is God says, will you follow me today? Will you stay and follow the course that I have set for you today? And then he will lead us from there. James talked about this in James 4:13. Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Isn't that life? Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. James is given the same sentiment that Paul was making here. If it is the Lord's will, I will come back. And I think that word that God gave Paul, do not be afraid, keep on speaking, do not be silent, was also a word of preparation in Paul's heart. Because as we go on in Acts, we will see the course that God takes Paul from here, and it's not an easy course that he takes him on. No matter what God has in store for us, friends, no matter what happens relationally, physically, economically, politically in your life, know that God still has a will for you. Know that God says to continue to follow him every day. And this is what Paul does. And it says when he landed at Caesarea, he went up and greeted the church and then went down to Antioch. Again, doing his apostolic stuff. And after spending some time in Antioch, Paul set out from there and traveled from place to place throughout the region of Galatia and Persia, strengthening all the disciples. He was visiting all the churches that God had used him to plant. He continued to encourage and continued to speak into their life. And I think that there are people that God has used you to speak into their lives. There are people that you've had influence in. Don't lose that influence. Continue to go back to them. Continue to encourage them. Continue to give them a pat on the back so that they can keep going. Because as we face the things we're facing in life, and in our business, we're wondering, will we ever recover from this recession? Have you ever asked that question? As we look at the greatest man-made natural disaster in the Gulf, and we wonder about the ramifications of that. As we continue to have the threat of terrorism in the United States and around the world. And as we face the personal struggles that we face, it can feel like we just want to cash in our chips. We just want to throw it in and walk away. But if we do that, we'll miss out on the greatest opportunity that I believe the church has ever had. That we are on the threshold, I believe, of God doing amazing things that the church has never seen. That I believe with opposition comes great opportunity. Now, the other couple weeks ago, when we were in Denver to have Gertie given to us as officially as our adopted daughter, that Gertie is now Kirk Yamaguchi, and you need to pray for her, that poor thing. So Joey and I were given tickets to go to the Rockies game. So I go to the Rockies game, and Joey and I are there, and they're playing the St. Louis Cardinals, and Joey and I are big Rockies fans. And sixth inning, Matt Holliday, who used to be a Rocky, he hits a home run, and they make 3 runs. And all of a sudden, the end of the sixth inning, they're behind 9-3. Now, if you follow baseball, when in major leagues, when you're behind 9-3, throw in the towel. I mean, it was over. We were so disgusted with the Rockies. And so Joey looks at me, because, we're given the tickets. You kind of invest in what you pay, right? And he goes, "Let's go." And I said, "We're out of here." So we get up and we leave. Go to our car, and we're driving home, and my parents live in Wheat Ridge, and so we drive up to my folks' house, and we're listening to the radio, and they're still losing 9-3, and we go into the house, and it's the 9th inning. And they get them out. They get St. Louis out 1-2-3. They come up to bat, and we're going, oh, whatever, this game's over. They start hitting. And they start hitting. And they're hitting. All of a sudden, a home run. And all of a sudden, it's like 6-9. And it's going, we could have been there. And they get more hits and more hits. All of a sudden, it's 9-9. And Joy and I are going, we left the game. We're missing this. And I'm thinking, extra innings, we could be there. Joe, hey, it's your fault. And then also they get 2 more men on base. Seth Smith comes up, hits 2 outs, and he hits it out of the park. And they win 12-9. And we went, we could have been there. It's your fault, Joey. You're grounded. Don't miss out on it. This is the point. Don't miss out on the greatest adventure that could ever be. That's walking in the will of God. That's encountering God, encountering others, and going and encountering the world. As God calls us to be a missional people, don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Keep on speaking. Don't keep silent. God is with you, and there are others that He has with you, and there are many in this community that want to know who God is, and He wants you to tell them. That's being a church, friends. And it's very interesting as this goes on, this account here. Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately, though he knew only the baptism of John. And it's interesting that Priscilla and Aquila, they heard him, and they brought him to Paul, and Paul taught them. This is exactly what God was talking to Paul about. He says, I have many others that are with me. Now he sends him this incredibly learned guy, Apollos. Paul raises him up. Apollos goes back to Corinth. And Apollos then leads the church that Paul started. This was the very place that Paul was so discouraged of that he wanted to leave. He wanted to quit. And God encouraged him to stay there another year and a half. Then he leads this guy named Apollos. And Apollos goes back and continues to raise up the work that Paul started through God's hand. You see, in the great economy of the kingdom of God, we have to realize that we are one piece of many pieces in the puzzle. But if we don't do our part, that piece is always going to be missing. We have to say yes to Jesus and say, okay, Lord, I will follow you. But if you feel like you've been beaten up, you've been discouraged, and you feel afraid and you don't feel like you're adequate to do it, just know that there are many others in this room that have felt the same way. Now, I saw this video, this movie of a guy who's in training, and he's being trained to be a rescue diver for the Coast Guard. And Kevin Costner is his trainer. And Kevin Costner was out on a rescue mission, and his whole crew was the helicopter exploded in the ocean, and they were all lost except for Kevin Costner. And he felt like giving up. But now he's a trainer of this young man, and let's watch this scene of how Kevin Costner speaks into this young man's life. Like this is what God would be saying to us.
I've been trying to peel the layers back on you for a while now, and I just don't get it. I mean, this kind of work seems a little remedial for someone like yourself. You know, big swim champ, offer to every Ivy League. You give it all up to be here with us. I spoke with your coach, Jake.
You spoke with my coach?
Yeah, I spoke with your coach. Something in your file just kept hanging me up. You win the state championship your freshman, sophomore year, and then you don't swim the next two. I'm just a public school guy, so pardon me, but it didn't add up until now. Kirk Holloway, 100-meter medley winner, thrown through the passenger window, pronounced dead at the scene. Abe Eichmann, first-team All-American. I know what it's like to lose a team.
Yeah. What about living in a small town where everyone thinks that you killed their brother or their son or their best friend? You know about that?
Kind of small town where everyone still waves to everyone, just not to you. Have a seat. I want you to start being a member of this team. The team you have now. You have a gift, Jake. You're the best swimmer to come through this program, hands down, by far. You got a whole record board to prove it. But you know what I see when I look at it? I see someone fast enough who's going to get there first. I see someone strong enough who's going to last. I see someone who can save a life that maybe nobody else could. You really want to honor the initials on your arm? Then honor your gift. Save the ones you can, Jake. The rest, we've got to let go.
You see, you have a gift that no one else has. You are uniquely and beautifully created by God. And God wants you to partner with him to go save those that he wants you to go save. But we can't give up. Some of us, we just need to get going. We've never done it before. And I encourage you to take a class like Alpha or Foundations, where in Foundations you learn about the basics of the foundations of the faith, and you'll learn the things that you need to know to be able to share more of your faith with others. You just got to start at the basics. Others, you have friends and you have family and you have coworkers that God wants you to come alongside because you have a gift of knowing them in ways that no one else can. That he's given you a unique position of being in relationship with them through your spheres of influence. And God just wants you to say, use that gift for them. You have many abilities and you have many experiences that I don't have. And God can use it for the sake of his kingdom. But the key thing is we just got to not be silent anymore. We've got to say, you know, God, I just trust that you're with me. And as I go, continue to lead me according to your will. And Lord, thank you that there are many others that are here with me. And if you're feeling discouraged that you just can't do this, go to your prayer tent. Find that place that you can go to the Lord, read his scriptures, and say, Lord, speak to me. Encourage me. Give me what I need so that I can do the things that your scriptures are telling me to do. Let's stand. And as we worship him, let's consider the call of God that he has on all of us. Let's consider the gift that he's given each of us. And let's consider the people that he's put in our life that he's saying, I want you to save them through me.
Sing a new song to him who
Remember, the staying power that we need is to remember the words of the Lord to Paul. Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you, because I have many more in this city. As you go from here, go with that assurance. We will have the ministry team up here if you need prayer for anything. Please come forward and get prayer. If you have felt like throwing in the towel, come and get prayer. If you would like to be empowered to be a witness for God, come and get prayer. These folks are here to love you and encourage you to do the things God's calling us to do. God bless you as you go from here, friends. Have a great week.